Welcome back to Construction Executives Live. I am your host, Jeremy Owens, owner and founder of U.S. Construction Zone and Three Generations Improvements out in sunny Folsom, California. Welcome. Thanks for being here. We have another great show for you today. And thinking about it, I was thinking about such a stark difference that we have in our generations, especially when you think about the baby boomers. My dad's a baby boomer. He still works for our business. His adoption of technology is completely different than millennials and Gen Z, and the way they communicate is typically pretty awful. There's not a lot of understanding that goes on between those two generations, and now's the time that we really do have to come together as an industry and understand that we're not going to fully understand each other necessarily, and have a hard time maybe putting each other in each other's shoes per se, but we need to come together and understand that, hey, there are pros and cons to technology, but also we have got to figure out a way to honor those that are exiting our industry. I think about my dad retiring soon and going, he has so much knowledge in his head. We got to make sure we get that out of his head and into those young professionals. And the only way to do that is through good communication. So really looking forward to today's content as we dive into that. So we are sponsored by the great team at build12.com. Automate your construction business into a revenue generating machine. Check out build12.com. Ask for Les over there. Tell him I sent you there. He'll give you a free demo and kind of take a peek behind the curtains. I've been using it for a couple of years now and really enjoyed how it's creating efficiencies and automations in my business and helping me with my time. I really struggle with finding extra cracks of time, and Build 12 has really helped me with that. Okay, we have a great show for you today titled Construction Crossroads, Innovation, Legacy, and the Future Workforce. The construction industry has critical challenges facing us today, a confluence of three industry trends that can seriously disrupt the industry. One, the clash between traditional processes. Two, the rapid rise of technology to stream those processes. And three, like I mentioned, a growing generational gap. With these seasoned professionals nearing retirement and a wave of young talent entering the field, the construction workforce is caught in a transition unlike any other. How can we leverage technology to honor the legacy of experienced workers while equipping the next generation to lead the future of construction? We are fortunate enough to be led today by industry professional David Hernandez. He is the head of U.S. for Electrosoft LLC, a provider of innovative planning and scheduling solutions for the construction industry. And he has 15 years of experience in all different aspects of commercial construction, from business development to running his own business. He brings a diversified experience to his role at Electrosoft. And David understands the pain created by tremendous company growth without proper processes and poor technology in place. I think that's probably everyone. Removing the pain is what drives him today. Thank you for being here, David Hernandez, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Tell us a little bit about your kind of start in the industry.
Well, so I actually started pretty young. I would be considered cheap labor. A lot of my family members were in construction in some form or fashion. So weekends, summers, I spent my time, again, like I said, being cheap labor.
Sure.
But learned really early that I loved seeing things built and being a part of that process. And so, like most of my generation, probably your generation as well, we were told, go to college, get we want you to do white collar work. We don't want you to do this. But that was my calling. I love to see things built. So went the white collar route a little bit, sales, business development, some management, but had the opportunity to partner with a construction company here in Houston, and grew the commercial sector. But it was you think you know a lot about construction until you're really in construction. Like you said, you're third generation. You know, you think you know it, and then you're in the driver's seat. You learn some valuable lessons with zeros at the end of them sometimes.
Yeah, totally. And like if you're not continually learning, then it just how quickly you're left behind. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So I mean, you've had lots of roles in management. How did you learn the management skills you needed to kind of manage your team?
Yeah, that trial and error. So,
Hmm.
um, I use the word manager and leader. They're two completely different things. So I early in my career, I was a manager and learned, I thought it was all about telling people what to do and, holding them accountable. And, I was promoted pretty quickly in my early life, moved up into retail. And then, um, I realized pretty quickly that that's not what it's about, and
Hmm.
leadership doesn't always mean boss, but typically if you're in that role, it's more about kind of empowering people, learning from your team. Just because you're in a position of leadership doesn't mean that you know everything. So I learned quickly. I had some really talented people around me, and then guiding them, right, helping them take their expertise and kind of putting it in the right path. So um, it it took a little bit, but there was some trial and error there for a while.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that also so true of our industry? I mean, we typically don't go to even if we go to business school, which I went to business school, none of that freaking relates to,
Mhm.
being putting that hat on and being a manager and owner and being a leader. None of that really freaking applied. And that's what really pisses me off about my college experience is
Yep.
that I mean, I had business marketing degree. You'd think I would be able to be drawn on that. And so I just have a huge that's a whole nother podcast. I just have a huge issue with our college system right
Yeah.
now, especially preparing for construction. It's just you really got to get into the nitty gritty, and whether that's an internship or a trade school, you got to be immersed in it. And otherwise, it's you're just going to be like, oh great, it's trial and error. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. You almost need a construction academy, right? To kind of get the real world
Yeah.
experience. Well, I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more that I think is missing big time for sure.
Oh yeah, totally. And did you have a mentor that helped you through this journey?
So I look back actually I had quite a few actually. So early in the journey, the gentleman who actually helped me get promoted was one that actually pulled me aside and said, "David, you're about to get fired. Like nobody wants to work for you, And I was young, so I felt like I had to prove something. And people who were working for me that were much much older, and he was like, "No." So it kind of helped me. And he tried to explain to me the difference between a manager and a leader then, and I was in my early 20s, but as I progressed through my career, I can think of a couple people. Not naming my name. I don't want to leave everybody's name out, but I had worked for a lady named Lisa Ireland who taught me more of like kind of the coaching and personal development piece and the kind
Yeah.
of servant leader mindset. Another servant leader, Matt Windling, which he probably imparted more like intentionality and patience and kind of handle how to act that way in high pressure. And then I can't,
Mhm.
give my current boss a little bit of kudos as well because Jonathan Hunter, he challenges me in a way that is more like kind of that next level, that strategic thinking ahead from an executive
Yeah.
perspective. So
Yeah.
each of those has kind of helped propel, each step of my career. So there's a lot that have probably imparted stuff in me that they didn't even realize it. That I'm not trying to leave their names out, but yeah,
Yeah. I
for
mean, it's
sure.
such a key ingredient to our success is that mentorship role, and I think many of us, I did it as well as a young person, and it is you kind of have your ego that kind of takes over, and you think you can do it all yourself. When in reality, if you really seeked out more assistance and help from your peers, it just would propel you to greater heights. But I think everyone needs it. Honestly, no one knows it all, and someone knows something that you don't, or a trick or of the trade. And we need more of those, especially as I said about our aging workforce. Like we need those folks to impart wisdom on us real quick.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there was one of them, somebody who told me a long time ago, if you're the smartest person in the room, find another room. Right? Always learn and absorb. It doesn't matter who you're with. Like you should be able to learn something from those that are around you. So
Yeah. Was there any other advice that you were given in your early career that you're still leaning on today?
yeah. So if any of my team members are watching this, they're probably are going to spit it out. It's control what you can control. It's probably my number one thing that I have to tell myself on a daily. It sounds so simple, right? But it is probably the toughest thing to do, especially when you're working collaboratively with people, if you're in a leadership role, because you don't have control over everything. So learning to let go of some external things that you can't really control, and also how you respond to some of those external challenges that you can control, right? Your attitude towards people, your behaviors, and how you manage and respond. This is probably the one thing that I try to do daily. And I have to remind myself every day. It's not it's a process.
Totally. All these things are such learned things. And also, if you guys have a question for David, you can try to put it in the chat. I'll try to take a look at those as we go through. But before we get into the technology side, I wanted to kind of touch on what I kind of opened with this generational divide that we have. How did we get here? What are you seeing in the field? You're in a different kind of aspect of construction than I am, especially being on the commercial side. I'm more on the remodeling side. So we'll probably see some different things, but what are you seeing there?
So even since we've last talked, I've had some other conversations around this, and like construction has always been very hands-on. And so when I was kind of stepping back and looking at construction that, our parents were probably a part of, they started very early, very young, right? They were the wet behind the ears, greenie on a project that are now the legacy and the expertise that they bring is immeasurable. But I think some of it is the fear. I've talked to some of the retired, the fear of, I should have given more, but they were afraid that if they pass the information down, that they're not as valuable to a company. So I think they feel that maybe their experience is undervalued. So again, that comes back to people, and we'll talk, but and then young people can bring, like new people and young people either right out of college or new to a project, they can bring fresh ideas without the hands-on experience. And so sometimes it's like, you haven't paid your dues, so how are you going to tell me what to do?
Right.
I was at a conference in Austin 2 weeks ago, and it was funny because a couple of college professors were there. Well, they did a conversation at a college, and they asked a room full of construction management track, and they said, how many in here want to be a superintendent? And nobody, 90 students in the room, nobody raised their hand. Who wants to be a project manager? And all 90 hands go up, right? And it's understanding that value of what a superintendent brings to a project is, I think that's undervalued and understated in some aspects, that they are they're generally they're the general on the project, right? They're the ones that are driving everything. Right. Yes, PMs are important. I'm not trying to discount PMs, but somewhere along the way, there's been this disconnection of what that is. So I think it's important that some of the old school construction guys can kind of help push some of that education around the importance of what we need superintendents. We need up and coming.
Right.
But superintendents are also those guys that are guys and women that are built through the kind of the rough within a project. So I'm seeing that shift where everybody's like more, I want to kind of run as a PM, or I want to be an executive in the office, versus kind of being that general on the ground of the project. So
yeah, are you like me in that you're a little fearful of this mass exodus that we're obviously seeing it already, but I feel like it's really coming. It's going to come fast and furious, whether people retired or age out completely. That knowledge is not being shared, and I think a lot of that has to do with pride, right? That they're like, they don't want to hear what I have to say. They're doing the technology thing. They got it all figured out. Like, so yeah, there is a little bit of issues there. It's like, if you don't have that leader at that office to bring people together, it's just going to die with them.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, and that's part of this bridging the gap, right? And I think I think what brought this conversation up with you and I was, I think technology could be a kind of a fix to that a little bit, but I do see, a little bit of pride, but some of that could be mitigated through company initiatives where the construction company could offer, So I know these guys have to build the project, so it's very difficult to say, okay, why don't y'all put on a clinic for a day or two, because that disrupts production. So it's this fine line. How do you put them in a position to teach, almost in a classroom setting, because they're really just learning day to day, but they're so bogged down with just stuff they have to do all day long. And, 60 to 70% of their stuff isn't building, right? It's admin and paperwork and reports and communication. And so I think that's got to be mitigated and corrected in the industry.
Yeah. Are you seeing some adoption from some of those baby boomer folks in the field? I mean, I know that obviously we're painting with very broad brushes when we talk about technology, but obviously most struggle with it a little bit in that it's not second nature to them. Learning a new technology takes a lot more time, and that's where that implementation thing really comes into play. Because you see that, I'm sure you see it, where a company forces a technology down the throat of everybody, and the folks in the field are like, they're not even seeing what it does to help them.
Right.
And I think that you need to communicate, all right, this is what it's going to do. It's going to do this for our time. It's going to do this. But instead it's just like, all right, here's the new tool, get after it. And these older folks are like, what?
So yes and no so there is some hesitation, but I don't necessarily think it's the hesitation to the technology so much as it's the fear of, is this replacing my expertise? And, and so that's the whole AI conversation and some other stuff. But I think it's around I think there's a responsibility from the technology providers. I think there's some responsibility from kind of leadership. Like, it's an enhancement, right? Not a substitute. And so it's probably very cliche. Most software companies probably talk people, process, technology.
Yeah.
But it is important, I think, if you can take that legacy expertise from your people, you can refine a really good process. The technology piece is an added value.
Right.
But if you just think technology without addressing the people in the process, then again, right, you have resistance to adoption. I think I saw a statistic that 70% of all data transformation and digital projects fail because of employees. And some of it's implementation, some of it's disruption, some of it's just disconnection. So you almost need that more bottom up adoption versus top down.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think, I've seen some companies that are very innovative, and they'll build like a kind of a citizen environment within their organization that kind of helps adopt technology. So they'll pick somebody from each team within the organization that is that technology driver that helps kind of push it out. So you have more bottom up versus top down.
Yeah, that seems like a great strategy. Do a lot of companies sell from the bottom to the top?
So that's yeah. So the executives write the check. So right.
Yeah.
So software companies are trying to get in front of the guys writing the check.
Yeah.
But you need that evangelist or that champion.
Sure.
And it's typically the user. So part of that comes with an education on how do you sell this innovation to your organization,
right?
Especially when they're kind of fatigued a little bit around the technology piece.
Yeah.
So I think you need that bottom up push, an evangelist, somebody that you can have champion, but you're going to need the top to buy into it.
Sure.
But when you talk about implementation, again, I think it needs to be bottom up implementation.
Yeah, I mean, I know you probably get this a lot, but how, with the technology coming at us fast and furious, right? I struggle with it too. Understanding what will work. Everything looks great. The presentations look great. You think like, okay, I can see this. So I think, how do you assist a company in making sure the technology is right for them? Because I imagine for a lot of folks you talk to, you're like, nah, this, you guys aren't ready for this, so that's a difficult conversation because we all want all this new stuff, but I think we're at the point now where we're like, crap, I just bought 3 of these. I'm using one, so we're kind of like, it's a lot right now.
Yeah. So you've seen a lot of companies have brought in, a director of innovation or director of technology, or right, their job is to come in and fix some of the disconnection, but also to protect the companies from buying unnecessary tech.
Right.
And so I use an example. I was at the DCW, which is a big electronic, big contact event in London. And you can even just think of any of the ones that are here. If you go to any technology conference, especially in contact, there's 100 booths, there's 1,000 people, and everybody's stopping and looking at the new technology. And I was with our head of innovation and our CEO, and I said, I want you to stop for a second, just look around the room. This is what our customers are faced with every day, like this noise and chaos, and which technology do we buy, and how do we buy it? How's it going to fit? And so they tend to just go back to what they do well, which is build stuff. Like, we'll deal with that later. Let's get these projects done. So I think is our responsibility is software providers, and that's not just technology, construction tech, all technology. We have to help them silence the noise. We have to make it easy to be the right choice. And sometimes we are, sometimes we're not.
Right.
But ultimately, we should impart some education and gain some education in every conversation we have. So I tell my team all the time, like, we want them to buy our software. Don't get me wrong. That's why we're here. But at the end of the day, if we can provide some additional insights on helping them, maybe it's a process, maybe it's aligning people, that's a win for us. And so I think that piece is the hardest piece. We have to quiet down all of this noise and give confidence. So, and
it's pretty well said. I mean, I think that's a good visual when you're at that conference. You're like, oh crap, man, there's a lot of folks here. So do you feel, I mean, I could probably guess your answer. Do you feel that technology is the bridge to, this gap? And then if so, how?
So I know that a lot of times I think people are concerned when we talk about concerned about technology. Is it replacing me? Is it doing this? And so I came across the analogy a while back, and it's a perfect analogy. It's the autopilot for airlines, right? So implemented in around 1930s, autopilot is designed to just manage routine tasks, right? And why the flights and why the plane's in flight. But the pilot is still invaluable. They've got to handle all the critical checks. They've got to handle all the critical needs. If there's they have to mitigate an issue or address an issue during the flight, and it disengages autopilot. So technology should be that. Technology should be your autopilot. It should take care of the routine, mundane tasks.
Right.
It should be there to help make sure that you're on the right path and let you know that, hey, you're starting to veer off path a little bit. So that, so that could be your business intelligence piece and machine learning and AI that's coming. Like, here's where you're headed. And if you don't course correct, you're going into a mountain.
Right.
But as soon as things start to kind of go sideways, that now we re-engage into the expertise of our teams. And that's where I think all this, the admin stuff, right? I said 60 to 70% of time for project manager or superintendent is administrative. So how do we get that stuff off of their plate so that they can handle the critical day-to-day building? They can mitigate risks. They can address people, right? That's the other thing, like the ability to free up time to be intentional with the crews that are on staff. I think that helps with some of the mental health as well, because you can address an issue, of crisis earlier. But if you're just constantly in this like kind of mode of chaos, right? It's like you're constantly just in crisis prevention. That's a lot of stress to carry all the time.
Right.
So we want to take some of that off of them. And I said, it's always easier to say it than to do it.
Right.
But that's, I think, where technology should be that gap. That's old and young. And I think that the younger generation is probably used to technology doing that for them.
Right.
So you don't want them to be so dependent on the technology that they're just like, okay, this should build this for me. Like, no, you still have to have some critical thinking. So that's where learning the expertise, legacy critical thinking, applying the new technology, I think that could be where you can really see some closure with the gap in age.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you could see, what role that leadership needs to play with this, right? So talk about maybe some of your experiences with, some good leadership that you've seen, like, crap, that is really working well for them, and then others that aren't.
So I think, first and foremost, I think we have to get away from this mindset of you have to use a certain thing. And so, I mean, even softwares now are spec into projects. And some of that just whether lack of knowledge or whatever, but I've shared this analogy with a couple conversations I've had with owners. Like, you're not going out to the job site and telling somebody that's using a DeWalt that they have to use Milwaukee or vice versa. Like, you're allowing them to use the tools, or they're using a skill saw and you don't say they have to use a hand saw. Right. So technology should be the same way. Like, don't dictate what softwares need to be done. Right. It goes back to that people, process, technology. I'm not going to beat that to death. But if you have the right process in place, the technology piece, if it's following that process, should be agnostic, right? It's all about the data and the reporting. So if I'm using tools that are communicating to each other, that matters. So leadership, though, needs to be able to be open-minded to when their teams come and bring ideas to them, but they also have to mitigate just buying softwares to buy softwares, right? And so I do think that happened early in the journey for construction, but they also need to, they're not dictated, they need to facilitate it. So if I have a team member who comes to me and says, hey, I've used this software at another company, it's really great, allow them to try it, right? And maybe try it alongside of maybe of a legacy program and have a true comparison. Don't just shut it down. And most software companies will embrace that. Hey, yeah, absolutely. I'm confident enough to put my software up against my competitor. So I think the balance needs to be between kind of this kind of trusting the experience of your team, but kind of what you're trying to do as a company, kind of evolving as a company. And that adoption scale, right? You always have your early adopters, and you always have that laggard. That's kind of don't be the laggard. Yeah. Be open-minded to say, hey, like, let's try this. Because I think right now a lot of people are behind the 8 ball. A lot of people are behind because they've waited to see what was going to go on, and now we probably need to catch up. Right. And construction moves pretty quick. So yeah. I mean, I think you're so right. And then with the people shortage that we have, it's like, if you're not adopting that technology and you're throwing bodies at things instead of technology, you're way behind. And your costs are out of control too. So now you're not as competitive. You have 5 extra bodies than that other company does. And so yeah, I mean, it's such a critical time. I guess looking back, at your career, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced when trying to introduce, new innovation to your organization? So I lived this, right? So I'm sitting there saying executives should do this. I was that executive that was like, no, we're stalling on a project. We need to get back to work because we're trying to adopt this technology. So we tried to be, and we knew that we didn't have the right. So we grew really quickly, and so it got to the point where it was build the project or stop and let's do an implementation, and ultimately money flows from project delivery. So we just would stop the project, or we'd say, okay, we'll let the office handle it. We need the field to keep doing what they're doing. Well, the field is what's driving the technology, right? 80%, it was 92% of your workforce is in the field, 8% in the office. So that was fine and well that the office learned it, but the field still wasn't. So our efficiencies and communication were still a problem. So my biggest failure was that we were so worried about this disruption, which I get it. You do not want to disrupt project delivery, but had we stopped and just said, okay, we're going to accept that we're going to take a day or 2 or 3, whatever it is, to get this right, that short-term disruption would have created a long-term gain for us and efficiencies. But what happened was we didn't disrupt, and we kept moving forward. So our efficiencies weren't there because we were missing things like something simple as a owner shows up on a job site, says, hey, I thought we were going to do this, this, and this. There's no communication. The superintendent's not available. And one of the foremen say, okay, yeah, we'll do it. And that's a $50,000 change order. You know what I mean? Like that's a problem. And it happens. And so technology prevents that. Okay, that's great. We got to put that into our process, into the technology. Then it flags that that's a change request. It's not part of the original scope. So those things that I look back on now from this position, I'm like, that would have saved us so much money, so much time, so much heartache. And then I wasn't as open-minded. So that's why I speak about that from more of a kind of that perspective. Like, no, we're driving the business. We know what we need to do. Y'all just go build. And I'm like, nope, that goes against what I just said about being being able to learn from your people. So
Mhm.
that, and it was some of our old school guys who were just like, hey, we could do this, this, and this, and
Mhm.
so we would say, no, we just need to keep pushing the way we're pushing, and there was technologies out there that could solve that problem for us.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, like we said before, I don't know why necessarily the construction has always lagged in tech adoption. I always kind of scratch my head about that because we build shit, I
Right.
mean, it's like it doesn't really make sense. And maybe because we're used to building shit with our hands that or manually or visually seeing a job board or all those things that we had in our mind. But what strategies have you seen work best with companies that aren't embracing technology? How do you kind of make sure that you're not disrupting? Because I imagine that's probably your biggest thing you got to overcome, right?
Yeah. So I think this one's almost kind of a circle back to what we were talking about a second ago, where you have companies who have brought in a manager level person to their only job is to protect them from buying technology. I say buying technology. That's more adversarial. Their job is to help kind of fix their tech stack, right?
Sure.
And so they are going to be very protective if a software company is trying to sell them something. No,
Sure.
I've got enough problems I've got to sort through first.
Right.
So that's a challenge, and that goes back to what the comment, like technology was kind of late. Construction was late to technology.
Hmm.
I remember 15 and 16 tech. We were buying a bunch of technology, and no
Yeah.
problem. But it didn't. There were little point solutions, right? They weren't really an enterprise level product that kind of talked across multiple people. It was just like, oh, that's a really cool thing. Let's do that because we're struggling with it on a project.
Right.
And they didn't talk to each other, and
No.
so we just bought and bought and bought. So that's where that tech fatigue comes from. Like we've
Hmm.
spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in software. None of them works. I don't want any more software.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you're rewinding.
Yeah.
So I think that it's good to be early to the table, but you have to be careful that you're not just buying something to buy something. So I think that's where that illustration of like we've got to help quiet down the noise a little bit. And
Hmm.
there's so much information out there now, right? I mean, by the time they get to a buying decision, they pretty much made a decision. That now it's just
Right.
our job to help quiet the noise. And why are we better than somebody else?
Yeah.
The other thing is I think technology companies need to play nice together, and not necessarily maybe a competitors. I get it, right? We're competitors, but within a project delivery, that life cycle, there's so many things and so many steps and other softwares that kind of fit in different holes.
Right.
I think there's really a need for some integrations and the ability to kind of pull data into the same data source. So because an executive,
That makes sense. Yeah.
what they care about is the data and the information, right? They want to see the information. We actually just had a call not so long ago. We were talking about this, where ultimately the software for them isn't as important as the information that's being received. The end user, they care about what software is using based on use of use or whatever. But if it's all delivering data to the same data lake, that is important. And I think we're seeing more and more of that. I mean, think about construction as a whole, very competitive,
Yeah.
but you have joint venture projects all the time with
Yeah.
competitors. So why would we not embrace that same mindset within technology? So
Yeah, and there's so much more ways for that implementation to work now. The technology around the implementation is so much better now. So, it's like creating that win-win, right? Like, hey, it's not just about selling the software; it's about making sure they get what they want.
right.
Because then you got maybe a potential lifelong customer. What other tech are you using? Let's see how we can make this work together. And maybe that's some custom work, but that is work that's going to really go a long ways with that company.
And I think that'll help open up more opportunities because, like you said, right? I mean, it is a competitive market, and it's hard to
Mhm.
get somebody to come to the table. But now, if you're having a conversation with a CIO about, hey, we're willing to talk to your drone company, or we're willing to talk to your ERP company, and let's see if there's a collaboration there. They're a little bit. They're like, oh, okay, that is more. I think able get you to the table a little quicker.
Yeah, as opposed to it just looking like more work, like,
Right.
oh crap, you know?
How are we going to make this work? And I've got to do it internally, and that's
Yeah,
cost.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, beyond the technology, what other factors do you see playing a critical role in evolution of construction industry, such as the workforce development, regulation changes, or sustainability?
So, I mean, workforce development, that's new, right? That's never been a problem in construction ever, right? So that's a new one, right? No. So workforce development is always, I think, probably the most important. I think that you have to care about people, right? And you have to be intentional. And I know that we've kind of touched on kind of the mental health thing. And a lot of people are kind of talking more and more about it. When you look at the industry, most of your workforce could be one injury away from losing their home, or not, that they're the breadwinners and now they can't work.
Right.
So I do think there's some opportunities to improve some skills as well, so that you can move along a career path a little easier.
Yeah.
There's always going to be regulations and sustainability things that you're going to have to deal with, and that's going to ebb and flow with whoever's whichever government's in the White House at the time. So I think that's the one thing I love about construction, is it does have the ability to kind of pivot, right? So so this administration, they care more about this. Okay, so let's kind of shift a little bit. And so, but ultimately, it will always come down to collaboration within your organization, because you're also collaborating with other business owners, right? So, weird thing about construction is companies hiring companies, all trying to work together for one common goal. So everybody has kind of different ways that they do things. So companies that are really good about adopting kind of cultural differences and providing some things that are, that allow that uniformity to happen quicker, I think those are the things that will help improve companies. But yeah, I think you have to focus first and foremost people, for sure.
Yeah. Have you seen any changes in the workforce development side? I mean, it's exhausting how much we've talked about it, but obviously, it starts with a young age. It starts with wood shop, and we had that when I was in high school, but not soon thereafter it was gone, and I haven't seen it come back in our area. I know around the nation there seems to be some of those things cropping back up, but if you don't start at the young age, and you're not swinging a hammer with your pops, or you're not in wood shop, how do we get those guys and gals to even consider this industry?
Yeah, so they are bringing that back here in my part of Texas, which is fantastic. And not just wood shop, but automotive. They're bringing back. I mean, it's good to see it coming back in the schools.
Yeah,
because I think it goes back to that illustration where you ask 90 students if they want to be a superintendent, and they're like, "No, I don't want to be a superintendent. I want to be a project manager," because their mindset is a project manager is more computer, like more white collar, and no offense to my PMs out there, but then the superintendent. And so I do think that's got to be addressed early from high school. And then I think more and more colleges are offering some certifications that they didn't offer before around construction management. It used to have to be a 4-year degree. Now you can go do associate's level training. So and then apprenticeships. I think you mentioned it early on. I think that is missing from the industry,
right? And
I think that should be something that construction companies get on right away. Like, how can we get more apprenticeships in?
Yeah, no, definitely. Now, I mean, with technology, in front of us, we have this new beast, artificial intelligence, machine learning. We have all these digital tools. Where do you see this all going? And obviously, AI, all this stuff is considered technology, but this is its own beast.
Right.
And it could be very, very good. It could be very, very bad. It depends on who you ask. But I mean, the bottom line is AI is here to stay, and how can we use that to our advantage?
So the event I talked to you about that I was at 2 weeks ago was an AI and data transformation event. And so it was very interesting, room full of construction companies and executives and some data managers. And it was very clear that nobody's an expert right now on AI, especially within the construction industry. And so, AI is such a big animal. But what was telling is, when we start to kind of peel this onion back a little bit, we have a lot of companies that haven't even identified KPIs. Like, they don't even know really some of the minimum measurements that they're measuring on projects outside of cost and time, right?
Sure.
So like we talked about, let's kind of step back a little bit, right? So AI is here to stay.
Yeah.
But how do you position yourself to get on that journey? And first, let's know what we're measuring, right? And then you already have a lot of things that are in place from a machine learning perspective, the ML of that journey, because you already have the data trends and the data.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you take that information, what's important and what's not? Because now you can see your trend data. AI is going to allow kind of that next step, right? Kind of like the autopilot, right? Where you're headed for a mountain and it's going to give you some ideas on how to mitigate that problem, but it's not going to do it for you. You still need that critical thinking from the human perspective. And I joke and I say, hey, AI might take over the world, but let's make some money off of it while we can. As long as they don't call it Skynet, right? So,
right.
But it is important. But what I was sharing with the group that, while I was there in Austin and others that were there speaking, we already have a lot in place that we could be taking advantage of from a machine learning perspective, the data, right? And that's why everybody's freaking out about the data transformation and we're disconnected. And it goes back to the more technologies play together, the easier that is.
Yeah.
And it was just very interesting to see kind of how people were addressing that journey. And I think people were afraid that AI is going to take their job, but I think construction just requires too much human interaction.
Right.
Things will be replaced. So there'll be some admin roles. Like I said, some of this admin stuff that we can get off of people.
Sure.
All that does is elevate, right? I mean, we don't have operators anymore. They used to telephone operators, but doesn't mean that those people just vanished off the earth. They just elevated probably and moved to a new career path.
Right.
So yeah. So for me, I think AI in construction it's still kind of shaky on what it can do and what it will do. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of companies out there that say they're using AI when really it's probably more machine learning. So it's understanding from an educational perspective the difference between the two.
Right.
And then what do I really want from AI? Right. And is it going to, if I'm already getting that from a high performing employee, I just need them to have the data, and then they can continue. They can make those decisions on the road. So
yeah.
But yeah, we're on the AI train too. It's part of our roadmap.
Sure.
But for now, it's more about just good data, good clean data.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I'm with you. I don't think it's gonna replace jobs. It's just gonna change jobs, right? Yeah. Instead of it being like, like you said, some of those admin tasks. I mean, social media, blog writing, all these things that make things a lot easier now. Now that person is freed up to do something else a little more high level, and we already do have a shortage of people. So, dang it, these are not bad things. And I think that's where I'm at, is that people need to understand that this could be really helpful, especially if we look at these trends that we have. And it's like, we're going to have to replace hundreds of thousands of people somehow, and it may not be bodies. So we might want to consider adopting this a little bit more.
Yeah. And that was a key point that I missed, the people shortage, right? That does allow, you to operate a little leaner, and so you don't want to always operate lean if you don't have to, but if you are operating lean, it does give you that opportunity to close some of those gaps.
Yeah, it definitely does. What does the future hold for construction professionals as they look to streamline operations, improve collaboration, and enhance those project outcomes?
So, man, I wish I had a crystal ball. So everything changes so quickly, right? And so I think for the future of construction, it's going to come down to data, right? I mean, that's that bottom line is we build things. We should always evaluate how we built it, and so the next one is better. We talked about the regulations. There's always going to be some type of external thing putting pressure, whether it's costs or whatever it is, something. So the data will allow us to be better planning, better planners, build things a little more efficiently. Not just disruption within the construction industry, but disruption of the community, right? Because nobody likes projects. So I think you've got, companies that will be adaptable, collaborative, and data driven are probably the
Mhm.
ones that you will continue to see excel. The ones that are resistant to those things will have a hard time.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So,
mean, that seems like the writing's on the wall with that one, right? I mean, yeah, just how everything communicates together, and like you said earlier, the leadership to bring all this together. I mean, it's going to be critical. I honestly, we don't have a lot of great leaders in construction. I mean, no offense. I mean, I've struggled with it myself, but it's like it's not always a natural thing. Like you said, if you're a manager, doesn't always mean you're a leader, and vice
right.
versa. And how do we kind of level up our skills in terms of leadership and communication and mental health we talked about, like all of these things play together, and if we don't have good leaders in position in our jobs, dang, I don't like the results that could happen.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. I think it goes back to just, you know, most leaders, if they didn't get, masters in business and were hired by a Fortune 500 type company, they've grown, right? Probably your dad
hmm
is probably an example of that. They've
yeah,
grown into that role because they built a business and now they need to manage people. So
yeah,
you learn some very hard lessons. It's like almost like being a parent, right? There's not a manual to it. You just kind of like, that's a mistake. I don't want to do that one again. You just kind of check these mistakes along the way. But if you're
right,
not passing that down to the next generation, they're gonna repeat the same mistakes. So I think that
yeah.
again back to having those mentorships and apprenticeships and that kind of stuff is important.
Yeah, what other advice would you give those young industry professionals, those people that are just getting in? Obviously they already have that technology background that's part of their life. So what advice would you give them to really help their, propel their career?
So I would say surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, right? I mean, it's probably early in your career that probably seems silly because there's probably a lot of people out there that have been doing this a long time. But sometimes when you get out of school, you think you know everything, and
Yeah,
so I would say be be humble and open and listen, right?
right.
Surround yourself, and back to that comment, right? If you're the smartest person in the room, find a different room. Like learn something and be a sponge, but also don't be afraid to challenge and ask why. And I'm a why person. I always want to know why, and it does drive people crazy, and it drove my dad crazy growing up. But I want to know why. Why do we do it that way? Why is it
Mhm.
done this way? Is that the best way to do it? And maybe I have a better idea. Don't bring a problem without a solution. That's another one because you can say, "Well, that's not the right way to do it." Maybe you should offer an alternative.
That's
So I
great.
think that yeah, just learn, and if somebody's pushing you away, just try to lean on them as much as you can.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, especially try to be a sponge on those older generation
yeah.
to, get what you can from them. Also, like if you another crystal ball thing, what would you predict would be a defining characteristic of a successful business in the construction industry, let's just say 10 years from now?
Ugh. So that one, I'm sounding repetitive here. Data is going to have to drive decisions, and
Mhm.
what data looks like today versus 10 years is going to be completely different. But it's still going to matter, right? You
Right.
still you still need to know what's going on and how that's going to play out. I think the the one you hit on earlier, the workforce development, the companies that put time and invest time into that. And
Yes.
I know we're getting close to time, but real quick example. So I spoke with the gentleman from Hoffman Construction, and Hoffman has put a lot of time and energy into kind of this like development, and so they'll bring a trailer on one of their long-term projects where people can collaborate and meet, and
Yeah.
he kind of explained it like a man cave, kind of a bar without alcohol, like a man cave,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or a woman cave. So I mean exclusive here, but that allows peer-to-peer conversations.
Right.
So I think workforce development and encouraging peer-to-peer doing doing things that are maybe outside of the norm, being a little different, but also having the ability to be agile and resilient. Because
Yeah.
when you're outside the norm, people are going to give you a hard time, and they're going to say that you're wrong. Like if you have a clear vision and a clear path, like
Mhm.
stay on that and be that early adopter to things. So I think that those would be the things I would say to the
Yeah,
industry.
and that workforce development piece. I mean, I think everyone's waiting for the industry to solve these
I can't wait
problems.
for the
And
industry.
yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, like we have, hundreds of trade organizations. We have, people that are you're going to the government for needs, but at the same time, there's not enough action taken from companies, especially those in the medium to larger size, where they do have an R&D department. They do have these other things that at their disposal, and like there's not enough community outreach. Like let's get not only peer to peer, but let's get the young people to understand what their jobs look like.
yeah,
Because if they can't visualize that for themselves, then they're not going to do it. And I think that
right.
everyone's just kind of waiting, like, all right, well, what are we supposed to do? And it's like crap, just do something, please.
Yeah. There was one other piece of that I've had conversations around. This is not my ideas. I actually, most of my best ideas are stolen anyway. So is outside of the industry, when people get injured, a lot of times they're kind of stuck. Like that was their livelihood. Like, what do we do? So I worked for a founder of a technology prior to this role, and her vision was that how can you provide a path for injured construction workers to work within technology, because
Yes,
their knowledge is valuable. I
right,
love that idea. Now that I'm kind of in this role, I have the ability to kind of to pursue that. But not only that, talk to other CEOs and executives of tech
right.
companies. I'm like that knowledge that they bring, and that also gives them another path, right? So if yes, you
Hmm.
can't really work on the job site, but you could still provide extreme value to the industry
Yeah,
through whether it's trainings or just helping them implement technology because of what you know in the field. So that's something that I think technology companies can own some of that development as well. But it's a little, almost like a wounded warrior type program, but
right.
the value is immense.
Yeah, we can't afford to lose
No,
people, and yeah, that injury thing is a huge component to our problems. I mean, that's what leads to a lot of, the drug addiction and alcohol abuse
no,
is like, crap, I'm in pain and I need to work. And then before you know it, you got oxy and you're in trouble. Like, so it's a big component. And like, yeah, there's no pathways to anything, it doesn't seem like. And I know that every industry has challenges,
right.
so we're no different. But it just feels like we're just spinning our wheels a lot when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just it's about building the next project. I don't want to sound very like curt like that, but it does come down to, all right, we've got to continue to move on. So
Hmm.
it's just this constant grind, right?
Yeah, it
What's
is.
next? What's next? What's next?
Yeah, no
Because I think
doubt.
sometimes people get caught up in that. They get lost in the shuffle of all that. So
Yeah, it can be a rat race for sure. I
yeah,
mean, it does feel that way a lot of times. It's chaotic, but you're just kind of controlled chaos and on to the next project. Let's go. So, tell us a little bit more about, is it Alecosoft? Am I saying that correct?
Alicosoft,
Alecosoft.
yes, Alicosoft, yeah.
Okay. And then, what kind of problems is it, trying to solve for our industry?
So So as a whole, EcoSoft is we provide softwares for built environment, and we have some prop tech as well. Here in the U.S., we focus more on the building lifecycle side. So our core product is Ask the Power Project. So it's planning and scheduling platform. So our goal is to provide easy to use, powerful software that it provides.
Hmm.
Whether you're building something simple as just a standalone home or a complex project. But ultimately, we want to make sure that we're bringing kind of some industry expertise as well. So we've got team members who have been in the industry that have either been schedulers or they're familiar with the industry. So yeah, so our goal is to just continue to help the built environment. Construction is probably our biggest core of that. So
Okay. Where is the corporate office? Because I know you're the
Houston.
U.S. part here. So
Yeah,
where?
I'm hearing you. So the LLC, the LegalSoft LLC, is a U.S. based business.
Okay.
So my headquarters is in Houston. That's where I'm at.
Okay.
Our parent company is Alico, which is a UK based. So they're out of London. So
Okay.
and we have 7 regions across the globe. That
Got it. And what
yeah.
what size of companies? And are you more on the commercial side, or like where you find like the size and type of
Yeah, so primarily commercial, vertical construction, civil.
work?
We have government as well.
Mhm.
we got a pretty good contingent of the ENR 400, but we also we love the small to medium sized enterprises as well. These companies that are growing and trying to do a little more complex projects and maybe don't have the right software in place. That's I think a really good sweet spot for us.
Yeah. Awesome. So how do people learn a little bit more, connect with you?
Yeah, so you can look me up on LinkedIn, David
Okay.
Hernandez. We also have a Alicosoft North America page on LinkedIn, and then our website is alicosoft.com. You can put /US. It should geographically redirect you, but
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being here. I love your expertise, and I'm looking forward to kind of what you guys are doing in the future. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, totally. Thanks again for being here. This has been Construction Executives Live. We'll see you next month for another great topic. We're going to get into the financing side of our industry. Again, reach out to build12.com. They're our sponsor today. If you have any questions about their app, build12.com, and they'll give you a free demo.